Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 196 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I'm Tim Robertson, the host of the podcast and also the coordinator of the training program within the ALPO. Thanks for downloading and listening. The Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and their associated phenomenon and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. This podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it alive. If you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, you can donate to it via Patreon by giving as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, you receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. For a monthly donation of $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast. You can find out more by going to www.patreon.com/observersnotebook. And if you'd like to join the ALPO, membership begins at only $22 a year. For more information, find us at www.alpo-astronomy.org. And you can also find us on the Facebook. Just search for ALPO Astronomy. And this podcast also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And if you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll never miss another episode. And now, episode 196 of the Observer's Notebook. Enjoy. All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody back to this edition of the Observer's Notebook podcast. And we're very thrilled tonight to have a special guest, Alberto Anunziato, Lunar Observer from Argentina. Welcome back to the podcast, Alberto.
Thank you for having me in the podcast, Tim.
That's great. Now, you were on probably a year or 2 years ago, something like that. Just give everybody a little bit of background about yourself. Where in Argentina are you? Things like that.
Well, I live in a town, the capital of a state. It calls Paraná. The state is Entre Rios. That means between the rivers, like the Mesopotamia, because we are in between two large rivers, Uruguay and Paraná. Not very good for astronomy, but it's a good landscape. And we are close to Uruguay. And yes, I am assistant coordinator of the Lunar Topographical Studies section. Mm-hmm. I'm very proud of being part of ALPO. That's me. As assistant coordinator, I am in charge of the Focus On section. Mm-hmm. That is a section of the Lunar Observer magazine in which we choose one selenographic feature, one crater or one mare, and mm-hmm. we collect the images and make a little dossier, and it's a very popular section, and I'm delightful to work with David Tesk, who is mm-hmm. a very active mentor. I am very, very happy to work with David.
Yeah, David's a good guy. Definitely. So what sparked your interest in astronomy originally?
Originally, I was initiating in the observation in comets. Okay. I was part of a small observatory, a suburban observatory, and we gathered a group of guys who, they were interested in photography of comets, but we were trying to achieve an observation that was a valid report of a comet. by for 4 or 5 years, we report comets to the comet section of one association, Latin American Association, Liga Iberoamericana de Astronomía, which I am a member of that association. I think this association has a database who I think it was the reporting to a large database. I think was International Comet Quarterly. That
okay.
I think that it doesn't exist anymore. But this was my primary interest. But the comets are very elusive, and months can go by without any comet within the range of a medium-sized telescope. So
very true.
We began to venture into other observations, some observation of variable stars, meteors, but as you know, even in Argentina, the visual contamination year after year has canceled the possibilities of meteor observation. Years ago, I could observe meteors from my backyard, from in my house in the city. Now that's impossible.
Okay, so what is amateur astronomy like in Argentina?
It's basically it's very linked to photography, to astronomy photography. It's not very spread the interested in the observation in itself. No, for me it's a problem because we have very gifted photographers who can make great observation, but all remain in the social media, in Facebook or in Instagram, and not and they don't. The majority don't have the habit, the don't report these observations,
right,
which is very sad.
Yeah, that's more and more astrophotos are just going straight to Facebook and not submitted for any scientific research or anything. That's really sad.
Yes, indeed.
So what is your current observing equipment?
I have a very small telescope, 4-inch Maksutov Cassegrain.
Okay.
I have a camera, but I rarely use it because I like visual observation. Every day more in love with visual observation. I'm some kind of lover of the ancient selenography, and I'm very interested also in the history of the visual observation and in the psychology of the visual observation, because it's very interesting to know how the brain constructs, make the observation, and the eyes are some kind of instrument of the brain, which is very, very interesting. It's very tricky also because you observe sometimes what you want to observe. You have to be aware of the biases of the observation, but it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's I run the training program for the ALPO, which teaches basically observers how to observe, through making drawings. And I remember early on when I was in the training program, I would look at one crater and I'd see one thing the first time out. And the more times I looked at that crater, the more detail I was able to pick out and discern and actually transfer to a drawing. So that's the value, I think, of visually observing too. It makes you a better observer.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's incredible how when you know how to look, you increasingly get more data from your observation. I always say, I always told the story that about the companion stars of Sirius that was discovered with a large telescope, but today it can be observed with a medium-sized telescope. That's because we know that is there,
right?
And yes, and knowing about the relief, the geology, the topography of what you are going to observe. Sometimes it could be a bias, but sometimes improve the observation, and it's very interesting to note that as example, very gifted observers like Evelius von Schroeter or previous observers couldn't register or even couldn't observe wrinkle ridges because they didn't know that wrinkle ridges exist. But you can say with a large telescope, this must be very obvious, but it wasn't obvious if you don't know how to look at what and the nature of the wrinkle ridges. It is impossible that I am a better observer than Evelius, an observer, a Polish observer who writes the first lunar encyclopedia, Selenografia, in 1647. That you may think that he didn't observe the wrinkle ridges, but he observed the zones in which wrinkle ridges are very obvious, and that's because don't pay attention to a detail like wrinkle ridges because he was looking for something else, and that's very, 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 very interesting.
That's very true. I equate that to, I've done a lot of lunar dome observing, and I didn't even know what a lunar dome was until I read an article in the journal about them. Then now I'm seeing them on the moon. That type of
yes,
thing.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It's incredible how many details you could observe visually. Details that are, I don't know, surfaces details with has a diameter of, I don't know, perhaps in the case of wrinkle ridges, 10 or 100 meters by shadow contrast, no? But and you can think that's impossible with a small telescope. But if you improving your observation every night, it could be possible. Yes, it's a very, very, very rewarding.
It is. It is. The more time with the eyepiece, the better you become. Exactly.
Yes.
So what brought you to the ALPO?
Well, I think it's a very nice story and something to be proud. Something that ALPO members should be proud. As I said before, I started with comets, but we move on to another less elusive possibilities of observation. No, and at that time, I came across the ALPO website. It was ALPO website, my first approach to ALPO. I was immediately fascinated by the possibilities to observing the moon and the planets.
Mm-hmm.
Before reading the ALPO material, I remember, especially a handbook of lunar observation, I shared the idea that lunar observation, could be only recreational, that everything was already known. That's a widespread idea, shared by the vast majority of amateur astronomers even, which today is basically, as I said before, amateur astronomy is almost completely confused in Argentina with astronomical photography. But this deeply rooted preconception that lunar observation is, we can say, the first step in learning to observe, and we can say those who are already know how to observe are dedicated to the deep space. It's a whimsical nonsense, no? But how did I know that this was a whimsical nonsense? Through the reading of the material I found on the ALPO website. That was a really transforming experience. I remember I have beautiful memories of our first serious lunar observation. I was member of this suburban observatory, as I said before, years ago. We were a small group of fans of the astronomy. Today, this small group, we form a separate group of this observatory. We form the Sociedad Lunar, Lunar Society, and I carried in my backpack every night that I was going to the observatory, the ALPO material in my backpack, and the Lunar Observer in particular. And I always say that I was like a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman, because I opened my backpack and take out the Lunar Observers and the handbooks, and I convince my friends, look what we have to observe in the moon. And I still remember with a great emotion, our first contribution to the Lunar Observer. It was a photography of the crater Dionysius. It was in July 2015, 9 years ago. And today I remember with emotion to the very moment in which I see the photograph of Dionysius by a friend, Pancho Alsina Cardinale, appeared in the Lunar Observer. It was a great joy, a great proud.
That's
then
fantastic.
The following months, I remember that we made our first observation for the Lunar Geological Change Detection Program, that is conducted by Tony Cook.
Oh yeah,
on association with the British Astronomical Association. I remember that observation was a webcam filming of Plato. And I also remember Tony Cook's complimentary comment for an observation that surely had no great objective value, because this webcam was not a real good webcam. But Tony made us feel proud with his words, nothing less than in the Lunar Observer magazine. No? A complimentary comment by Tony Cook in the Lunar Observer. I always say that Tony was our mentor, and we owe him everything in the field of lunar observation.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a good story, and getting something published like that, I know, is huge motivation for anybody, especially in this hobby where we are amateurs, basically. Now, you mentioned the Lunar Observer. Talk about that magazine, because I was just reviewing the latest copy of it. It's huge. It's like 90 pages.
Yes, you can say that is went out of control because it's
That's
increasing every month. Uh, that's a great job that David Teskey is doing, because it's a hard work to
hmm
put all these images in the file, in the PDF file.
hmm
But yes, I think and I think David is doing a great job, because
Oh yeah.
every issue has new contributors, new people who not only send their images, but also send texts, which has transformed a newsletter in a small magazine, which has, I think, a good, an amazing level in the people who write the
Oh yeah.
articles. Yeah. That's I think David must be very proud of his works.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not a newsletter. It's definitely a magazine. Yeah. It's beautifully done, beautifully edited, and you're all throughout it too. You have a number of articles and drawings. I love your drawings. You're very talented in that way.
Yes. First, because I didn't know how to use properly the camera, and second, because as you said before, when you make a drawing, when you observe and collect details to a drawing, to include in a drawing, you know, you are increasing the knowledge about the feature that you are
hmm
observing. It's very hard. I am a very anxious person, so this practice of remain behind the eyepiece for a long time, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes. It's a task that is very good to me, and I would like that young people have that experience of being attached to a telescope, and to concentrate in one tiny point in the lunar surface. I would like to be more artistic in my drawings. There are contributors of the Lunar Observer that made a great job. Um, um, Not so many as those who send photographs, but
hmm
the lunar sketching still is a tradition that is still survive in our magazine.
Yeah, I hear what you say about you wish you were more artistic, but I can tell you from coming from the training program, I don't look for the artistic quality of the drawings. I look for accuracy.
Yes.
If
That's
you're
the first.
drawing what you're seeing, and it's accurate, that to me that's more important than being a pretty picture.
Yes. For that reason, I am not dedicated. I usually not dedicate so many time in the during the observation to the accuracy, no, um, to the artistic details. No,
hmm
I concentrate in the accuracy, and in the data that could be valuable later. As an example, if you I prefer to be accurate in shadows,
hmm
tonalities, or bright tonalities, or a detail that could be uh, rare, that in the accuracy of the diameter of a secondary crater. Because this information could be retrieved from a lunar atlas. In the final sketch, you could correct this if you draw a crater bigger than it really is.
Right.
But there are some data that are, let's say, only observable during that night, or even sometimes there are data that couldn't be observed photographically. That seems very old, but lunar visual observation, because of the eye physiology and how the brain constructs or make the observation, some data related, I think, with brightness and shadows are still today. The brain sometimes, very rarely, could beat the photographic camera.
Interesting. Now, your current area of interest is in basin and buried craters, correct?
The majority of my observations are of wrinkled ridges.
Okay.
But it is very difficult to make a systematic observation of wrinkled ridges, because there are thousands of wrinkled ridges. But I am a proud contributor to the Lunar Change Detection Program. I made every night that I use my telescope, I try to make the schedule of observation that the Lunar Change Detection Program states. Every night there is a list of lunar features to observe in certain time, which reproduce the exact illumination conditions of a transient lunar phenomena observed years ago. So our observations could be compared with the previous observation, and if the previous observer saw what the new observer is observing, you could say that what the previous observer reported as a lunar transient phenomena, it is simply the illumination condition of the exact moment of the lunation. The lunar features are very different, with different illumination, and sometimes you could observe a crater and see a bright that you can think that is extraordinary, but is the usual bright during, I don't know, 1 hour each month.
Right.
And with observation, you could reduce the catalog of transient lunar phenomenon reports to eliminating those who are nothing less than a strange appearance of one lunar feature, but strange, but regularly seen every month. And the second program that Tony Cook introduced every month in the Lunar Observer is the buried crater and basins. That is a program that deals with the submerged relief of the moon. because the Moon is battered with millions of impacts, and above all, this gigantic lava float that 3 billion years ago made the lunar marea and eliminated the existing relief. Basins are those gigantic craters. The cat is, I think, 300 kilometers diameter, which are the older craters, older and bigger, that formed when the bombardment of the asteroids was beginning. Let's say the first chunks of material were bigger than the later asteroids. No, so the bigger craters are the older craters, and these enormous craters called basins, many of them were filled later with lava, and these are the lunar marea. But many basins are covered with lava or by other impacts, and the program's goals is to make a catalog of these basins that could be rare, but there are no basins catalog.
So help me out here. Tell me what a buried crater or basin would look like. How would you go about identifying it?
A basin is very difficult because only Orientale basin, which is largely or almost complete in the dark side, is a basin that we could see almost as a basin look when it formed. The more obvious basins are the marea, but are covered with lava. The basins have many and a structure with inner rings, generally in 3 or 5. But if you see an area, you could, as an example, Montes Apenninus is an arc that is a part of the ring of the basin, which is covered by the lava. But basins are very difficult because they are very deep beneath the surface. But buried craters, which are the craters that are more recent, because basins formed billions of years ago. Some craters that are buried could form before the lava floated, but we could say 1,000 years, a billion years ago. A buried crater is more easy to recognize because you could, with the correct illumination, that is to say, near the terminator, you could see, as an example, you could see a darker interior, a dark spot, which is the crater floor, and you could see a brighter relief, circular, that coincides with the relief of the crater in zones in which the lava is not so deep.
Okay. Does the ALPO Lunar Section have like target areas that you guys are studying for buried craters, or a list of areas that you want to do more observations of?
Yes, it's a program with many tasks. The basic task is to form a catalog buried craters, because there isn't a catalog in the International Astronomical Association of basins and buried craters. So we made observations that formation that could be or a basin, which is very difficult at sometimes of an arc, which is left of an older basin, and buried craters. In the August issue of the Lunar Observer, Tony Cook, in the report, includes a buried crater that I observed, so I could tell my experience of this crater to make an example.
Okay. All right.
I was observing Mare Frigoris, a wrinkle ridge that runs east to west, which is rare because most of the wrinkle ridges run north-south. And I made a sketch, and I noted some details near the edge of Mare Frigoris. As I said before, I always compare my visual sketches with and photographic images to see if my observation is right, because photography is more exact. And in the photography, an old photography from many years ago, which I took with a good telescope, I noted a dark, a very subtle dark spot near the edge. I made zoom. I enlarged the image in the zone northeast of Plato, and as I was enlarging the image, you could say that it was something very similar to what could be described as a buried crater.
Wow.
And I went to Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter Quick Map, which has many layers, topographical, and there is a layer in which you accentuate the contrast. I don't remember how is the name of this layer, but you could exaggerate the shadows as like the Terminator was near, and with this layer in the Lunar Reconnaissance Quick Map appears like a buried crater, but I took the coordinates and went to the catalog of buried craters, a catalog that is compiled by Tony Cook. And it was in the catalog. It was a crater, very crater, that have very similar, not exact coordinates that I know write in my notebook, but very similar. So I made a report to Tony with the images, with the photographic image, because I didn't see the buried crater. The photographic image and took some images from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and said to Tony, "Look, this could be a buried crater, but could be that the coordinates of I don't remember the name. It was a number of one buried crater in the catalog. Could be that the coordinates are wrong, and this catalog that I pointed out is the buried crater that is in the catalog." And it wasn't. The buried crater in the catalog is a buried crater bigger than the buried crater I was reporting, and my buried crater was a buried crater, we could say, in the interior of this bigger buried crater.
Oh my!
For me, it was more obvious the buried crater that I observed than the larger buried crater near. But this it was apparently it was a buried crater, and Tony incorporated this buried crater into the catalog.
Oh wow!
So I added a little stone to the building of the lunar selenography.
That's fantastic. It's amazing. There's still more to learn by observing the moon, isn't there?
Yes. Even without a telescope, because I only once see what it looked like a buried crater visually, in the form of a dark spot that then I went to the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and it was very similar to a buried crater. But this buried crater was near Grove crater. Was a more controversial. Could be a volcanic feature. And I remember in the case of the Grove crater, that is a previous case, that Kwok Pao, that is a Chinese selenographer, a frequent contributor to the Lunar Observer, sent me images, and we were analyzing if this feature could be a buried crater, which is another reason why the amateur astronomer must be part of organizations like ALPO. The dialogue with another astronomer, and with this more important, with the dialogue with people that know more than us. This is very rewarding. It's another motive to be part of ALPO. You could learn a lot from the ALPO members, which are very, very sympathetic, very, very willing to share his knowledge with other members.
This is great. Is there anything else you'd like to share about, what you think about the future of the lunar section?
Well, I am very positive about that, because the history of the selenergy, the history of lunar observation, it's a repetition of this circumstance. We know everything on the moon, and then another opportunity arises. in the beginning of the 20th century, everybody thinks that everything in the moon was known. And this change and the observation were still needed. At that time, I don't know, the basins, at that time, the lunar missions like Apollo, Lunar Orbiter bring an enormous amount of data, and you can think, well, nothing is less to know about the moon, and I don't know, as you say, the domes arise as a subject that are not observed well in the Apollo images, for example. And today, we could be in the beginning of a new experience of observing, because we are we are very close to another space era, and the missions to the moon are increasingly over the years. And I think one of the possibilities is to search, for example, for lava tubes, or more exactly to the skylight of lava tube. It is very difficult with a medium-sized telescope to watch these features, but could be a new ground to observe images from I don't know, lunar reconnaissance orbiter images, or even the images that the probes make during the landing. It was one of the latest missions that it was the Chandrayaan mission, the Indian mission to the moon. The images are the video images are very interesting. I published one text in the Lunar Observer making a brief analysis of the features that are seen in these video images that are quite rare, because they are like a microtopography. There are the details of the details, the tiny details of the surface that are very different from the features that we see in a wide field, no, with a telescope, or even with the missions that are orbiting the moon.
That's fascinating. Alberto, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast today. This is great. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we shut this off for today?
Well, simply, as I said before, to share my gratitude with the ALPO members. For me, it's a great thing to be part of ALPO. ALPO always opened its doors to ALPO members or not ALPO members, and I wish to share my gratitude with ALPO, and that is my primary feeling with ALPO. I hope that I can make at least a tiny part of what ALPO members have made for me.
Well, thank you very much. You have made a tremendous contribution to the ALPO over the years. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Tim.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Observer's Notebook Podcast. Again, I want to thank Alberto for coming on the podcast today and giving us a great discussion about observing the moon. There's so much to see out there. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook on the 1st and 15th of every month. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please give us a rating and a review. I'd really appreciate it. You can also listen to us on Apple Radio, iHeartRadio, Soundcloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, Amazon Echo, Spotify, and also on the ALPO YouTube channel. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon. You can give up to $35 a month, where you'll receive 1 year's membership to the ALPO and producer credits on the podcast. With that, I'd like to thank the producers of this podcast, Steve Siedentop and Michael Moyer, for their generous support. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the ALPO, is in the show notes. If you'd like to get a hold of me, my email address is commentman@commentman.net or on Twitter at @ObserversNBpod. And until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening.